And welcome back to Pop Culture Kaboom's radio show. Everything you want, everything you need in pop culture entertainment. And on the phone with me right now is the acclaimed and award-winning and visionary director, Mr. Timothy Hines. And how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thank you.
I say visionary because I've been following your career for a while, and the stuff that you do is very, in my opinion, very visionary and very good. And kudos for all of the awards that you've won for the films you've done. And
thank you.
And I'm glad to have you on the phone and to talk with you. And I kind of want to get my audience acquainted with you a little bit here.
Sure.
You have done War of the Worlds, The True Story, 10 Days in a Madhouse, and just recently Chrome the Series, which the pilot episode debuted on Amazon Prime. And here's a little interesting side note about that I kind of want to share with everybody. Amazon Prime is constantly growing in the United States. As of December 2019, so just at the end of last year, they had an estimated 112 million Amazon Prime subscribers in the U.S., and that was up 95 million from June of 2018. It, of course, has surpassed the 150 million mark since the stay-at-home orders swept the world, and that enters the perfect storm for Chrome the Series debut, which Chrome the Series debuted on Amazon Prime with an unprecedented 150 million viewers. And in comparison, according to The Source, the final episode of MASH, which aired on February 28th, 1983, is the most watched episode of television ever, and it only drew an average of just over 50 million viewers. Did you know that?
No, I had no idea. Yeah, I just, and I come from a long time ago, the old days, where people had 3 channels, ABC, NBC, and CBS.
Yeah,
and
I remember those days.
UHD or something. UHV or UVH or some weird channel that was, and then I think some kind of community access where most of these things would get banned. So local audience, it's kind of hard for me to kind of get my head around the, and it's I think for everybody it's taken a lot to understand how the world's broken down into, going from 3 choices to thousands of choices of entertainment, and to find where, like a show like The Tonight Show, they used to get, what was it, like 60 million or 80 million, and local television would draw like 6 million people from the local area. But they had what? This rock, that rock, or a painted thing.
That's why Bob Ross became so popular, It's like...
Yeah. But I think that the success of Chrome is because, first of all, our hearts were into it. I needed it to be right for me because of just it represented so much to so many people. And I think that people have responded very strongly to something like you said, I'm a visionary. That's kind of scared me a lot. People have said that to me.
Well, then there's your second opinion there.
Well, I'm just this guy, bopping along like all of us, trying to read the tea leaves. I'm not Merlin. I don't age backwards and see the future or whatever, but I have a whole bunch of times sort of seen a trend that was about to come and been kind of spooked out about it myself. Like, how do I know that? And I don't think precognitive or anything like that. Like somewhere I ate some cheese and it made me fart the thought. I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say? It's like,
I want some of that magic cheese now.
Right? Where do you get this magic cheese? You fart the future. But look, I wrote the story Chrome and meant it as the cautionary tale that you really hope always remains fantasy, and just a strange amount of elements of it have sort of matched sort of some of the energy inadvertently. And I meant it more, metaphorically for what we were becoming, and not really ever wanting to see a dystopian world. Kind of like if you're writing for a zombie series, you're not rooting for there to one day actually be zombies to prove you right. It's a fantasy story, and you're hoping for no zombies. I'm in the no zombie camp. And so, I looked at this and I said, suddenly everybody is seeing this as like these people fighting back. And it's like, no, I'm going to tell you something. Chrome is working, and it works throughout for 2 things. Number one, I was a giant fan of The Twilight Zone. And I love the O. Henry endings of where you've been shown an apple through the whole show and it didn't matter to you. And suddenly everything kind of matters about this apple. And I'm just making that up. There's not an apple in Chrome, but so that's one, foreshadowing. But more importantly, Chrome is about everybody's been bullied. And Chrome is this story about standing up to bullies. And it doesn't, so there could be some resonance. You can see that with where people are right now and how they're looking to that and looking to authoritarianism and what's going on. And do I mean it generally about humanity? Yes. Did I mean it specifically like, oh, I saw this coming? No, I don't have any thing like that. But I do find it interesting that it scared me when I have a scene where the very bad sadistic person in the story, who is I was really basing on sort of more of an SS, Gestapo police officer of another era, and not trying to sort of do the future, but doing this certain kind of sadism, which was actually brought to us by the actor who played in War of the Worlds, The True Story, to segue. His name was Anthony Piana. And this is the first work we ever did with him, and we had interviewed a couple of hundred people for this role.
Wow.
To play this terrible Colonel Zet, which is the robot recapture unit. And this guy needed to be truly scary, and I was just so everybody was doing Darth Vader or doing sort of like that Terminator. They were giving me really intensely bad guy stuff. And when Anthony came in, he didn't even introduce himself. He just came in with this overcoat on and these gloves, and it was winter. And he took 2 minutes with his back to us to take off his gloves and take off his coat before he turned around and talked to us. And there was something really sadistic about that. There was something totally him controlling the moment, that was the fun he was having with this character. And we saw him, and instead of everybody else came in and shouted their orders. And he was like, have him taken to robot restructure. His energy was just very different, and his energy was very in command. And so, he does these very sadistic things. He shoots the head off of a robot when you don't expect it.
Wow.
And me being me, because I have an optimistic vein in me that I have to have in a film or forget at the end. People do nihilistic films, and I'm happy for them. And the person's coming back from the dead to kill everybody in the end, and it's like woohoo! But I'm not going to make that movie. I may enjoy it. The movie Saw was scary to me. The cutting off everybody's arms and legs and stuff was like, oh God, nobody would ever want to be put in that spot. It's not something I want to live all the time, personally for me, but it was a ride, a scary, scary, terrible ride. So for Chrome, what it is that we've all had these sort of sadistic people and these strong people that have used the system or used some kind of a system against us in some way or another. So it's more of a personal journey, and it's about people standing up personally within. And what I did was create a race of robots that, society, this is the scary part that's like what we're doing. What's happening in real life is that I based my story on a pandemic, sparks food shortages and social unrest. And it starts to get out of control, and the powers respond, become more authoritative. And it becomes more and more structured to where power and control and structure merges, and eventually people are put into relocation camps and sidelined.
Well, you got 3 out of 4. We haven't had the famine yet.
right. So here, knocking wood, and wanting the storytelling to be storytelling. And so the idea was that they use a race of robots to do most of their work because they're safe and controllable. And then a terrible thing happens. Robots start gaining consciousness. And not only that, but in a scary way, they think they're alive and they think that they're made in God's image, and they start praying. And they see themselves as sentient beings. And the corporation's position, Jasonda, says, no, you're malfunctioning. The fact that you're just so super smart robots and that you suddenly have developed this tick where you think you're alive, you need to go back to genetic reclaim for, restructuring. And instead, some of the robots run away, like people would do. And so Chrome came to me when I was reading about sex bots back in the day when they were just a thought. And Sean Young was just doing her first Blade Runner piece. That was the only piece out there like that, where she talked about, am I a lesbian or a replicant? Which I'm friends with Sean Young, by the way. I have deep history with. You might know that. And don't Google that. Please, everybody don't Google that right now. I'm so sorry. I'm like such an inept person sometimes. But I've known Sean for a long time, and we have a very intense public history. And I love her, and she's a really great actress. And we also have like a love-hate relationship or friendship.
Well, at least you guys, as long as it's cordial enough to exchange Christmas cards.
Well, it kind of goes like this.
Depends on the year.
No, Sean was working on a film that I was coming to work on with her, and the producer fired her and replaced her with me. Ooh. And so she was so mad at me that, she always wanted to play Catwoman. And like a cat burglar person, she burgled our studio when we were out shooting and stole our editing equipment and our editing computers. I should not laugh at this. And she dressed up kind of like in these black fatigues like a ninja and kind of looked like the Catwoman. So she kind of got what she expected, which was days and days of People Magazine and TMZ and World Focus on us sitting outside of our doorstep with cameras pointed at us for the stupidest reason, right, that our computers are stolen. And so some detective from the felony whatever squad eventually got a hold of Sean Young and convinced her that her son was going to go to prison too if they really kind of followed through on this and kept our equipment. And an hour later, she returned all of her stuff to her attorney.
Wow.
And we got all of our stuff back. But Sean and I have a long history, and we have a long friendship. But anyway, I'd like to move on.
Okay.
How about those?
Well, here's something interesting. If Chrome the series was released in the theaters and ticket prices were, let's just ballpark like $10. I know they're more than that now. It's been a while since we were able to go to the theaters, but let's just say like $10 a ticket. Since Chrome the series debut, if we just go off of the debut and $10 a ticket, Chrome would have been the highest opening ever at $1.5 billion for its debut, off of $10 a ticket.
And that's a very different prospect too. And I really see that. And I'm very, and it's a very different prospect people have to get dressed up and go out to the theater. So like, I'm not meaning to be a cynic about anything, but I just think it's a picture that time has come and people have responded, but nothing but positively to it.
And I remember I watched the trailer, and actually after I saw the announcement that, because I kind of try and keep track of all that stuff, and plus I've been following, like I said, I've been following you for years, so once you announced that, I was like, holy crap. And so, and I told my producer about it, producer Bill, and I said, hey, you got to go check this out, and because he's into science fiction too. And so he did, and he should have been watching it as well. He's out today because it's his wedding anniversary, so he took the night off. Well, otherwise, I'd expect him to be here to give me at least a little bit of a report, a review of what he thought of it.
We have so little to hold on to right now. You've got to take those moments.
Yeah, I don't blame him at all. I mean, something like that. It's, unfortunately, last weekend was my wedding anniversary, but I was here.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. What is that? 24 years? 24
great.
years.
That's great.
So Chrome the series, I like reading synopsises on the radio show, especially when it comes to movies and stuff. So I have all of your synopsises from your movies, or is it synopsises? And first up is Chrome the series, and here's the synopsis. Repair bot Perdix. Am I saying that right?
Perdix, yes.
Perdix encounters an escaped female pleasure bot whose human injury inhibitor is missing, and gives her military-grade armor to survive against the evil Iron Guards who police the robot populace. Thus, the newly created Chrome rises as a fearless superhero vigilante who stands up to the vicious oppressors on a mission to right the world turned upside down. And that is the synopsis for it. I did watch the trailer for it, and I remember when you first started working on Chrome. It has been a long time coming, but you have put a lot of, like you said, a lot of emotion, a lot of heart into it, and a lot of textures too. I noticed that when I was watching the trailer, it has some very interesting conceptual palette to it. The monochromic almost type of film filter on it. the almost very futuristic and almost claustrophobic set designs with things just kind of, it just feels claustrophobic and it almost gives you an anxiety of this future world that you're setting up. So I found it very interesting, and I remember back in a long time ago when I first saw images of Chrome, when you were starting to work on it, I mentioned that it kind of resembled a little bit of a Tron. I don't know, Cliff, did you ever see Tron?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so take that kind of, when he's in the Tron world, that kind of color palette, and apply that to, that's kind of, it gives you an idea of where Chrome is at with the visual aspect of it. And then I read also that you took some inspiration from Metropolis in making Chrome as well. How does all this play together? And I mean, and that's where I can get and that's where my thoughts are as far as you being a visionary director, because you can come up with this interesting, and plus there's some other elements too, but I'm getting close to the hard break here. So what made you decide to go that direction with the color palette?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's all right. What made you decide to go that direction with the color palette?
Well, when we started out putting this piece together, Chrome came to me because I was diagnosed with a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which turned out later on to be, they didn't know what I had. And they had given me a very short period of time to live. So I wrote the first draft of Chrome, sat down in basically like a little over a weekend, and wrote the first draft of a film that I would always like to have seen with no budget limit, or knowing that I was never going to be able to shoot this movie. And it was kind of like that pet project that was sort of pregnant in me for, a decade before, building and mounting, and that's sort of the thing that comes together. And I don't want to say like an opus, because there's a certain, you cooked in everything in the kitchen sink into an opus, and that's not what I was doing with Chrome, or never wanting it to be that. But there was a fun in old-timey science fiction that, of course, going back and looking at King of the Rocket Men, which is a 1940s serial where the man flies on, basically it's a dummy on a wire flown over like the hillsides of California. But as a kid, in my imagination, it was taking you to this place of suspended disbelief, where we didn't already know that there were creatures on other planets like we do now because of Star Trek, of course. And the question has already been answered for us, so that when actual aliens showed up, we're going to go, it was like episode 23 of V. And, you know what I'm saying?
They came down and ate all our mice and rats. And
right.
It was horrible.
Already properly conditioned us. No tinfoil hat conspiracy theory. But I grew up on comic books. I grew up on EC comic books, black and white, like back when Mad Magazine was a comic book, and it was in black and white, and it was these little hand drawings, and it's before it sort of became this more political magazine of the '60s, and it was more kind of scary Swamp Thing and that kind of stuff. So I had that going on, and then all of these Golden Age comic book characters that don't exist anymore, Candleman and the Spectre, and characters that were this undead guy who had some unfinished business, so he'd go around killing bad guys, whatever.
Well, hey, Mr. Hines, I hate to stop you there, but I'm at a hard break. But I definitely want to finish talking about that, and cool. Also I want to get practical effects versus CGI, because you used an incredible amount of practical effects in Chrome, the series, which we'll be talking about right after this. So don't go anywhere. More with Mr. Timothy Hines, director of Chrome, the series, 10 Days in a Madhouse, and War of the Worlds, the true story. So don't go anywhere. More Pop Culture Kaboom right after this. And welcome back to Pop Culture Kaboom's radio show on KNVC 95.1 FM, Carson City. And I'm speaking with Mr. Timothy Hines. He is the director of Chrome, the series, 10 Days in a Madhouse, and War of the Worlds, the true story. And before we went to break, you were talking about the old comic books that you liked, but you also mentioned something that I want to get back to. And that's that you were diagnosed and you didn't have a long time to live. But that was like 10 years ago. So is everything okay now?
So what it turned out to be was they didn't know what I had. And when I was diagnosed and told I had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, I'm not laughing about it because it's not just what's to be funny about that. And I thought I was going to die, and it was real. And it was like some kind of a get smart comedy, because it turned out that it wasn't true and that they didn't know what I had.
Huh.
But you're not going to die from lymphoma, but it's really weird.
Did they ever figure it out?
Yep.
Oh.
And they called me for years. I was called a zebra, which is a patient that it interests all the doctors because they don't have an answer to it immediately. And it's curious to them. And whoever discovers something gets to be in the write-up books. So you get to be sort of a cause celeb where they were trying to figure me out. And they thought I had a thing called sarcoidosis, which may or may not have been confirmed, which is a kind of an immune deficiency thing that you get genetically. The long and the short of it is I have muscular dystrophy.
Oh, okay.
So,
well, that's interesting.
And I'm going to say, so far, so good. I had an exacerbation last July before COVID set in for everybody else, where my diaphragm stopped working intermittently every minute, around the clock for months.
Oof.
And I can only tell human beings that haven't gone through this, well, there's nothing like basically having your breath stopped. And then having a couple of clumsy doctors at different points, which, along with they were probably doing really super great medicine, but I mean clumsy bedside manner, in telling me that, like, and every time your diaphragm stops, like, it could just maybe not start working again. And I'm like, well, thank you for telling me that. I actually yelled at one of the doctors and said, you don't know. We're all walking around never knowing when we're going to die. Like, you could die before I do. While you're in the middle of telling me I could die at any minute, but you could die. So don't tell me I could die. I don't want to know that, like, unless that's useful information to me.
Wow.
I just want to live my life, So I'll tell you the funny two things about having muscular dystrophy, which is funny, is you'd think that because it's inside your body, but your body starts doing things that are wacky. And, like, I go to move my mouse, and one time I threw my mouse through the window. Like, my hand just picked it up and threw it through the window.
Huh.
And I looked at my arm, and it was kind of like I found for the first time me talking to my body. And I'm not schizophrenic. I'm not bipolar. I'm no disrespect for schizophrenic and bipolar people. But I just looked at my arm and went, arm, what are you doing? I didn't tell you to do that. Hand, like, I told you to go this way. You went that way. Like, what are you doing? So I've been kind of finding it a challenge, and a challenge when I walk, that I will sometimes have what I now call as a jazz sachet, because I didn't really have good rhythm before this. And I'm doing the best I can. And what can you do? Some people are handed a lump of coal. Some people are handed a big bouquet of flowers with a bunch of fruit in it.
Well, you know what? You got the right attitude about it, at least. I mean, you're humorous about it. I mean, I would have been, if I'm throwing this thing through the window without conscious of willing it, I'd be writing stories about body part possession. But
right, and it's weird. It's weird. And so especially, so the times are strange, and the medications, like, there's weird things I have to do. Like, for instance, it's like almost like kind of a comic book movie. I have to drink coffee. Coffee is one of the things that makes your neuromotor skills, whatever, like, it sort of wakes them up.
See, I knew it.
And it makes your so, like, my cure is I drink a cup of coffee, which I liked coffee already. So it's like, throw me into the briar patch. But anyway, I didn't mean to go off too much on that. I'm doing my best, and it's going to be, I think I have years to come based on the trajectory of the kind of what's called an exacerbation that I've had so far.
Okay, well, that's I'm glad to hear that. I mean,
yes.
When you kind of brushed over it, and I'm like, wait a minute, 10 years ago he was diagnosed with this and he wouldn't survive, but that was 10 years ago, so is everything okay now? So I just wanted to make sure about all that. So
And then this last year, I'm just going to quickly try to gloss over this as fast as possible. In March 11th, my family and I got COVID-19 and got a moderate form, which meant that we had called the EDCAR multiple times. Doctors several times pushed us into going into emergency rooms. We had daily contact from 2 or 3 doctors that were just calling up from the clinic to see how we were and to get their own different opinions and discuss. First, they tried this medicine, then they took us off this medicine, then they gave us antibiotics, and took us off antibiotics, and then gave us rounds of antibiotics. And then actually one doctor sort of battling with another doctor as to how much wanted to give us more antibiotics than the other doctor wanted to give us. So anyway, the long and the short of it is It wasn't the flu for us. I don't care politics from anything. It wasn't the flu for us. It was like having the flu and then getting the flu and then getting the flu again and then getting a head cold all at the same time. Oof. And the body strain was daily, your body telling you you're going to die. And even having one member of my family just completely crying out like, when is this going to end? Because you keep thinking you're getting over it, and then it would crash down like a lie. Like you think you're completely over it, and you like feel good for about 6 or 8 hours, and then it would be this starting all over again crash. And there was a psychological aspect to it. So enough said, I'm alive. We tested negative twice. I've got to go get an antibody test still that my doctor's pushing me to do. And we're part of a study of people who have leftover symptoms but no antibodies. I mean, there are no live active COVID in our bodies anymore.
Well, that's good.
So anyway, yeah. So that's it. That's all I'm going to say on that COVID world. It's there. You know, if you have any questions, just write me and I'll tell you how real it is and scary with a whole bunch of bad stories. So no kidding. So there. Anyway,
well, let's start with from the beginning, shall we?
Yes.
And because, like I said, I want to kind of familiarize my audience with you, because this is, if they've been watching Amazon Prime, obviously 150 million people watching the debut of Chrome the series. A lot of these people are discovering you for the first time, and a lot of them I'm pretty sure listening to my radio show. And so, with that being said, how did you get into filmmaking?
I always did it. I wrote little typed little handmade books when I was 8 years old, and made little. I took my father's. I did not turn out to be a larcenous person, but I took my father's video camera when I was 8 years old. He didn't want me to play with it, so what I figured out was that they would shoot these home movies. And I could go and shoot an entire movie inside of their movies in like the 2-minute segment in the middle, and there'd still be enough left over at the end that they didn't know I used it all up. Then when they went to process it, they would play it. There would be my little Tim Hines production present. I've been doing this forever, and I was in plays, and I was selected for the National Endowment for the Arts. And
wow, that's impressive.
When I was a teenager, and blah blah blah, and all that kind of stuff. But the thing is that I would always be totally caught up in the fantasy of the story, and I would lose myself as I have to be this peg on the stage. And I don't mean to call an actor a peg. I have a whole bunch of actors right now writing me and being very upset at me. You're not pegs. You're not lumps of clay. You are full three-dimensional human beings who are bringing your own perspective to the movies, and you're bringing your histories. And that's what's so great about actors and working with actors is that if you get out of their way, they're just chomping to share their life stories through their characters.
See, I did a little bit of acting in high school too, but I discovered I have the range of a Daisy air rifle, so I was not destined for stage at all. So
right, I understand, and it's just not meant to be for everybody. And for me, I'm better behind the camera, and I like to work as a director. I'm a sort of the ultimate lie detector. I'm looking for them doing things that don't seem real, and also it has to be interesting. I want to know what they're trying to tell me. What's the story part that we're working on, or should we even be doing this scene? But going back to the beginning, I had a version of War of the Worlds. I shopped it around. We had Microsoft original people's money. When we associates that were financing the film from outside of Hollywood, we were connected with Universal Pictures for distribution. Charlize Theron, Michael Caine, Matthew McConaughey were cast members that we were closing the deals on at the time when September 11th happened and blew up the World Trade Center. And a few days before we were about to start filming, our production was shut down. So then we went on and we went from a $42 million budget to holding on to $8 million of the budget. And that's when I pulled out this script from Chrome that had been shelved. And when, it turned out that everybody that I'd showed it to in Hollywood, Spielberg and a lot of other people, James Cameron, looked at it and they said, this is a really great script. It's completely unfilmable. It's just two giants of a budget. And we can't shoot this movie. This is like a $600 million movie. But so I might as well just share this little bit. When we went to shoot the film, everybody was out of work. Everybody was upset. Everybody was stunned. Everybody was depressed. And I've always been this kind of, and this is one of the reasons I did War of the Worlds, I've been this sort of a fair and honest opportunistic person, where if the Martians are chasing everybody out of, let's say this is in War of the Worlds, the three-legged giant Martian fighting machines are chasing everybody out of London, and they're all going that way, then it's probably safe to say if I run this way, no Martians are coming after me. And everybody's gone, and they've left their houses behind. And, look at all this meat. Look at all this. Look at all these games and these game boards and this brandy they left out. And there was a character in War of the Worlds that did this in the story. And he was perceived by everybody as, the traitor to his unit. Well, his unit, was entirely 100% burned into skeletons, except for him, who ran away.
Well, so I'd run away too, so...
Was he the smart guy, or was he a coward? And maybe a little bit of both, but he's alive to tell you the story about it while he's eating other people's marbled meat. And sort of speaks that in Hollywood, the gods are always battling for NBC versus we're going to take over and we're going to get Disney, and Sony's going to do a deal with them if they'll do that, But in the midst of all of that, while I'm here working in Hollywood, there's sort of they're dropping breadcrumbs everywhere, and they're leaving openings, and they're for independence, and they'll call us in. And I've been, I've had the good fortune to work with, my last film, good release was 10 Days in a Madhouse, was picked up by NBC Universal. And that's when you get distributed to the four corners of the world by these people who are like, they just have a machine plugged in. And that helped a lot. And Broad Green, there was a company that they did they had some good films-ish, some good stuff that went by. Bad Santa 2, I'm not speaking against them. I mean, they had some marketing.
I can. I don't think Bad Santa 2 was a very good movie.
I didn't see the movie, to be honest with you. I was like, I looked at it, you know what I did? To be honest with you, okay, this is bad, because it's my distributor. Bad Santa 2 made me feel sad. Not in a good way. Like, it made me want to go back and watch Bad Santa, which was a much better film. It had its own flaws as well, but
but it was better days back with Bad Santa, not Bad Santa 2.
Yeah, but look, the other thing is that so Chrome is a story of underdogs, and so when we went to shoot it, I decided that we could pull this off, and we talked to this man. It's so crazy. All this stuff is so crazy that I'm telling you. This guy owned a brewery. And it was a city block long, and it was built in the 1800s, and then they kept working on it, building on it, right up until the 1980s, and then the company folded. And they sold it to this eccentric multi-millionaire who was in his 80s, and he drank whiskey every night. He was a happy guy. But like some kind of a weird supervillain nice guy, he lived in this brewery, and there was no power in the brewery. He would run power out to it. He was an engineer who had worked on dams and whatnot. And he would run power out to parts of the brewery. And so when we took over, he allowed us to have a complete free run of the brewery anywhere. But where we decided we were going to shoot, he would run power out to that part of the brewery. And we would have to have we had to have headlights on, because there was holes in the floor where they would put tape around it. And if we missed putting tape around, you could fall to your death 5 stories.
Jeez.
And looking back, as an older, wiser, more mature person of the world, I would never have directed people to walk around with headlamps where there was holes in the ground, without those areas being completely, worked through. But we shot for 20 weeks, and it was people who were out of work from the movie industry, and stunt people and effects people and people there was no work going on. And we did this kind of people made a joke about me being like this, this socialist film that we did, because we just said, we have nearly enough money to shoot this giant movie. So how about we come up with a rate that everybody agrees to, and everybody in the entire production, whether you're a production assistant or you're the top stunt person, you're getting paid the exact same rate. And everybody loved it, because money was suddenly no longer the issue of which hairstylist was getting more money over this one. Everybody's getting exactly the same pay.
Wait, a hairstylist get more money if they were somebody else's hairstylist?
Yeah. And there's a politics, and there's a place where, we, the directors, all fear the hairstylist. You want to know why?
Yeah.
Every actor passes through their chair.
Huh.
And whatever mood they have, they can imprint upon the actor.
Wow. See, I never had to do a hair or makeup before until I was on a guest on Creature Features TV show. And,
wow. Cool.
And that was like last year. And so I went on there and they're like, okay, we're going to do your hair. And I'm like, really? I'm the only one who's ever done my hair. So that was kind of a bizarre sensation. Yeah, so it was interesting, and I never had makeup on before for TV. I mean, I performed on TV like twice before, but that was in the capacity of doing my music, and so that's a little different.
Tougher because the cameras now, getting up to six megapixels, 8 megapixels, 12 megapixels, 20 megapixels, 40 there's a point where you can see if it's makeup now or not, and so there's been a lot of like transitions and forms that go along with that, like whether it's airbrushed on or it has to look like a no makeup. And of course, I'm always cracking up at the magazines, right? When you see like Beyonce is showing what she looks like with no makeup, and I'm going, oh wow, so she has some kind of weird disease where she has a natural eyeliner under her eye.
Yeah, my wife has a fit about stuff like that. She goes, whenever we watch a movie and somebody's just waking up, she's like, yeah, because people sleep with their makeup on. I don't think so.
Exactly. Well, women know when it comes to that, so I don't mean to be sexist at all in any way. Disclaimer there. But anyway, the long and the short of it is, we did this film. We were unable to post it. We took it around to Hollywood, and again, it was the same thing. People were saying like $100 million to post it. So I worked on it by hand over years, and I put bits and pieces together as demo pieces after we had shopped it, and talked to and worked with everybody in Hollywood. A lot of the original Star Wars people were involved, and Ron Thornton, who did the special effects for the Next Generation, invited us down, and we did some pre-work and some thoughts about it. But primarily, everybody was saying it's so gigantic that if you try to do this by CGI, this was the technology at the time. It's a $600 million film, but you could pull it off Star Wars style with the models, where not many people realize that at the very opening spaceship shot with R2-D2 and C-3PO in that little spaceship flying out.
Yeah.
That spaceship is a basketball glued together with a Kentucky Fried Chicken bucket and covered in tank model parts from these guys that were just like a bunch of geeky geniuses across the street from the McDonnell Douglas aircraft carrier place in Van Nuys, California.
Well, sir, just on that note, I have to take my last hard break of the show. I still got 20 minutes of show left and still lots more to talk about with Mr. Timothy Hines, because I haven't even really touched on War of the Worlds, the true story, in full detail yet. We still got to talk about 10 Days in a Madhouse. And of course, I want to get some more opinion on your thoughts on Chrome the series and the incredible success that it's had. So more show to come right after this.
You got it.
And welcome back to Pop Culture Kaboom's radio show. Everything you want, everything you need in pop culture entertainment. And just a little disclaimer about the Canyon White Show, that free beer is for those actually 21 and over. So you have to be legal drinking age while that beer lasts. But give her a call. Be part of our audience. And I am on the phone with Mr. Timothy Hines. He is the director of 10 Days in a Madhouse, War of the Worlds, A True Story, and the hit series on Amazon Prime, Chrome the Series, which debuted with its pilot episode on May 30th and garnered over 150 million views. If you have not seen it yet, you're probably one of the very few people that haven't, but I encourage you to go check it out on Amazon Prime. Also, 10 Days in a Madhouse and War of the Worlds, The True Story are also on Amazon Prime also, right?
Yes, that is correct. They've been doing very well.
So you can go and watch all three of Mr. Timothy Hines' movies and see why I say he is a visionary director. We were talking about War of the Worlds, The True Story, and I would just want to hit the very quick synopsis of it, which is, in this adaptation of H.G. Wells' signature novel, the plot of Martians invading Victorian England takes the form of a found footage mockumentary as the last surviving survivor discusses his extraordinary tale of survival during the War of the Worlds. And an interesting thing is, you were just talking about it, you had some of the guys who participated in the filming of Star Wars, and instead of going CGI and it being a $600 million movie budget, you went with miniatures. And so the practical effects for War of the Worlds, The True Story, is actually kind of interesting in and of itself. And because it kind of gives it, I always liked the Harry Houston movies.
Rayhausen. Rayhausen.
Yeah, that's
right.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh boy, I was so far off. I feel
That's okay.
embarrassed now.
Okay.
But I could name the movies though: Sinbad and the Seven Voyages of Sinbad, and
Yes.
all those.
And he was amazing, right, with his stop motion.
Right.
But and for us, and like I said earlier, we did the same thing for Chrome when we did the post for Chrome, which we'll talk about after, I imagine. But we did 2 years of photographing miniatures, and when we talk miniatures for the movies, we're not talking about like a tiny little thing. We're talking about like the Barbie doll scale. They call it the 1/6 scale. So if you talked about a house that was 5 stories, that would come up to your eye level, and just like this over massive scale of these buildings. And there's a reality to this where I think today what's happening is that, and I'm seeing a backlash against CGI, and not that CGI doesn't have its place, but there's just a point where we've left reality behind. We know that James Bond is a really super cool guy, but who can run across the top of a building that's actually collapsing under their feet and then leap 45 feet over to a beam, swing this way, and avoid all the sharp metal objects that are going by them and then land and not be a superhuman robot?
Exactly.
And so so one of the things we do with Chrome, of course, is the opposite of that, because she is this extremely powerful person. But going back to War of the Worlds: The True Story, when we did the Martian aliens from Wells's vision and worked very hard to get it as close as we could to, multi-limbed alien creature with a beak, we did it in the way that the Dark Crystal had done it. We represented it with a large overscaled puppet that had multiple people inside operating the eyes and the beak, and and each tentacle had a person on it. So we had 18 people working on tentacles. And they were all done with, wires against green screens, and had, a giant puppeteered quality, which was then composited into actual live action footage. And but the truth of that, where when we filmed the miniature of, let's say, the cylinder landing, instead of having, again, a nondescript thing that where it's all in your imagination, there was this physical object, and the thing was huge, like the size of 2 hot tubs. So the scale was still it was a smaller scale. But when we actually did the cylinder into the thing and the top is coming off, we actually had an operator inside turning the inside of the top. There were some very cool elements about that, where you were there live watching this thing happen, and you look up from your camera and go, "Oh, yeah, no, it's small, it's miniature," like that. But still, it was cool. But at the end of the day, it's all about having fun. And yes, there's messages and there's stories, and we all want to be tested, and we all want to think about our humanity and what would I do in this situation. And there's things in storytelling that's what it's all about at the end of the day, or else it's just a bunch of people flying around in blue tights. So that's what I did for the theme for War of the Worlds, and it's about humanity's tenacity, and about us discovering things within ourselves. And I think, for instance, as an example of one of the themes that I work through my films is that I think it's much more interesting to rehabilitate a bad guy and have them turn into a good guy at the end and help for the cause, than to have, like, you shot and killed the bad guy. They're dead.
Oh, you know what?
But have them realize their folly, and
always bugged me about movies nowadays. Is like the villain always dies at the end, which I mean, to a certain degree, it's like, oh, look, he got his comeuppance. But at the other hand, it's like, well, that's not really a good message to be sending, that you can just kill.
Right? Just kill everybody.
Yeah. So
kill everybody you disagree with, and so it works up to a certain extent, but. So ultimately, and I don't want to give away all the plot lines and endings in Chrome, because I started off exactly the opposite for that film. But when I did 10 Days in a Madhouse, the true story of Nellie Bly, who at 23 got Joseph Pulitzer to let her commit herself into Blackwell's Island lunatic asylum for women, on what is now Roosevelt Island, and there's condominiums there. And my actress that I worked with on Chrome, Natasha Coppola-Shalom, Nicolas Cage's niece, she has an apartment across the street, and she can see the turret of the last part of that lunatic asylum for women. And I did the film for 2 reasons. One, because of Nellie Bly. She was this amazing person who gave all of her money to charities, orphanages, beyond what she needed. And 2, she was the first woman. Well, there's 3 things then, but she was the first woman that had front page headlines on newspapers with a byline, "The End." And she would do anything to get her story. She was just, tenacious about this. So, $3 in her pocket, convinces the most powerful newspaper mogul in the world to let her be his newspaper person. She got herself committed by being paranoid of women in a poor woman's workhouse. And they all were afraid of her because they're going to kill me, they're going to kill me. And she had a knife, and she was really scary. So they committed her for life to Blackwell's lunatic asylum for women at a time when men smoked cigars while they did surgeries. And they didn't know what lunatic was. It was some, they thought people touch their nose. Oh, you're crazy, or you're not crazy if you could touch your nose. So it was a dumping ground for human beings. And men, like if you were caught having an affair by your wife, you could have her committed as mentally insane by just signing away a single sheet of paper, and nobody's going to listen to her after that.
Wow. So if she caught you cheating, you could have her committed.
Exactly. And there was a woman in the story that's a true life character that actually was a real life human being that she caught her husband, and it was her wealth. It was her money. But women didn't own their own property in America. Excuse my frog in my throat. But women didn't own their own property at that time. So while Nellie Bly was in there, she saw multiple murders and rapes, unfortunately, and it was very sensitive how we had to portray that. And the reason being is that Rikers Island, the prison, is where they drew their nurses and orderlies from because they couldn't afford a budget for nurses and orderlies. So they gave the prisoners a choice. You can sit in here in a cell forever, or you get to be the nurse of a ward. And they were like, yes, we much would rather do that.
Oh, so they had criminals in charge of the insane asylum, pretty much.
Exactly, the lunatics in charge of the asylum. And so here's the beyond it being a story, here's the tragic part. 70,000 women died in 26 years.
Wow.
In Blackwell's Island.
And nobody looked at, well, that was in 1887 though, right?
1887, they were cremated. And their bodies were put in these little tin cans, and then they lost the record books. So they didn't know who these women were. They were just numbers.
Oh.
And
well, there's parentheses. You can put that in quotes that they lost the record books.
Right. So, you don't even want to know. So, but it was so bad. So we actually filmed it in Oregon because now Blackwell's is torn down, condominium. So we went to Oregon and we shot in this place. Everybody said, go to Fairview Training Center. So it's where they filmed One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And we had a reporter who was a friend who kind of talked us into using this closed facility. So as we're filming it, guess what? It turns out this facility that we're shooting in is where they created this form of science that Hitler used called eugenics. And we're like, oh, great. And it was like really a challenge to film there because there was a lot of bad energy. And there was a lot of bad energy amongst people of like the feelings of how many people died there. Bad
energy. Let's talk about those condominiums over Blackwell's Island. I mean, that's almost like the script of Poltergeist right there, Right.
Right?
So...
Would you have your place there where thousands of women died who were perished? Right?
I wonder if you surveyed those people if they actually know that.
No, and how about if they knew this, that Typhoid Mary, the famous nurse that didn't know that she had typhoid and was spreading it to everybody, was a nurse there. That's where she was a nurse.
Really?
So
wow.
Yeah. And so, like, right over there on Roosevelt Island, there still may be some vestiges. No, I'm just kidding at this point.
Wow, that's crazy.
But look, the long and the short of it is we did well with it. Gina Davis invited me to open it up at her Bentonville Film Festival with Walmart, what I called Walmart's Apology to Women Festival for getting caught by keeping their hours to a minimum wage so that they wouldn't get full benefits. And they felt bad, so they held this festival for everybody. And they were descended upon by 2 million sort of women's rights activists, which I was one of. And my film opened the very first inaugural festival of that, did really very well. NBC Universal picked it up, which we were happy about, and then it got spread to the four winds, like distributed right up to the gates of the Kremlin, so to speak, in multiple languages, and but it's good, right? Because you want your story told, and it was a hard film to make and a hard film to, So then, flipping past this really quickly, I shot a film last year called Charlie Boy, which hasn't been released yet, with my good friend Kelly LeBrock, who was the Weird Science supermodel who was married to Steven Seagal. And we had a good time on that. And with Burt Young, who was the brother of Rocky in the original Rocky Balboa movie. Paulie, he's a bruiser. He's going to be the one that's, like that. He was that guy. Really wonderful and a really a good guy to work with. And again, my theme was based on a true story of a stand-up comic who had been an enforcer for the mob. And he had turned good and stopped being an enforcer for the mob and started helping people in bad situations and helping people not to take bad loans and do things and sort of worked against the mob.
See, when you say an enforcer for the mob who's a stand-up comedian, automatically I think Ryan Reynolds should have been doing that role.
I have to tell you, the whole experience was, I felt like, okay, I'm a visitor from another planet for some of these people, because it was, a lot of the cast members were ex-people who had like 25 years in Rikers Island and were doing extra roles. And so I was introduced to a lot of very interesting people where they called me Timmy. And I was perfectly happy being called Timmy. Timmy, come over here. I want to show you something. And it'd be like, okay.
Yes, sir. Okay.
but I do have to say that I own my own set, and I did a really good job with him. And what I did to make this movie work is I surrounded all the main characters with all the secondary roles. I hired stand-up comics. And I thought, rightfully so, that they would get this material and get that we're doing a movie with a lot of ex-mobsters. And it's sort of a semi-autobiographical story with a really good twist ending and the subtext is some bad guys become good guys. Some bad guys turn good. And so I shot that. It hasn't come out yet, though. So I can't really say too much else about that yet until we have our completion for that. And COVID certainly
definitely don't want you to violate any NDAs. Those things are the bane of my existence.
We're going to be okay
too, by the way. Okay.
Right. And then coming to Chrome, look, one of the things that I had troubles with, which I'm a feminist director. I believe in women's rights. I believe in women's equality, that they should be paid what a man should do. But if they have to have like a special robotic suit to do what the guy does, then that's a foul. That doesn't count. No, sorry. But I don't mean to be dark about it. But if the woman can do what the man can do, like on the physical level or on the emotional level or the psychological level or whatever's required for the job.
Intellectual. You forgot intellectual level.
What's the no-brainer part about all of this? And so it's basically the same thing for all equal rights. It's pretty straightforward, and our lives will be a lot easier if we could just focus on different things then. But who am I? And on a giant, machine, I'm this tiny, tiny, tiny little cog. And I'm just sort of, trying to tell my story. So when I did Chrome, I did this story because these stories came out about the idea of a sex worker robot. And I thought about what it would be like to be that sex worker robot, that you were used for that and programmed to be that, and sort of like being a sex slave and having to have all these experiences. Would it be the same thing? And especially if you had sentient consciousness. So when I wrote Chrome, her very, very first introduction, she's in a pose, kind of like the pose of the woman on the mud flaps on the silver woman on the back of Mack trucks.
Well,
you would see this sort of.
Mr. Hines, believe it or not, that hour went quick.
Oh my gosh!
I'm at the end of my show. Real quick, just one more quick question. When can we expect more of Chrome the series?
So what we've decided to do, and it's been the only complaint about the fans, which is a good complaint to have, is that everybody has to wait 3 months per episode, so it's going to be a year before it entirely unfolds.
Oh, okay.
And we're taking our time. We're doing it right. We're making sure that and it's during the pandemic that we're already ahead. Our fourth episode set. But they're going to be released every 3 months. So in August the 30th and onward, from there, every 3 months.
All right. I will keep an eye on that. Thank you, sir. I appreciate you coming on. And unfortunately, I'm at the end of my show. So with that, a big thank you to Mr. Timothy Hines for being my guest this weekend.